All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Welcome to HAI. My name is Ahmed. I'm the Director of Industry Programs here at HAI. And today I'm delighted to welcome and introduce our three guest speakers, Lakshmi Balasubramanian, Utkarsh Contractor, and Chris Lemons. They come from three different directions, but they all work together very closely on this project that we will talk about. Lakshmi is a lecturer and researcher in the field of special education at the GSE. Utkarsh is a CTO and a senior fellow, senior research fellow at Stanford. And Chris is a professor of education at the GSE as well. The team will share findings from a randomized controlled trial, RCT, evaluating the impact of an AI-based tool on reading comprehension among middle and high school students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'll let them introduce the study in more detail, but before we start on logistics, for our Zoom audience, you can use the Zoom chat to message the group, but ask questions through Slido. You can click on the link that will be in the chat shortly, and you will help with any questions about that. And if you are in the room, there are a number of QR codes around the room if you would like to log into Slido to upvote particular questions. We'll split the Q&A time between questions from our virtual audience and our in-person audience. Let's get started with no further ado.
I'm Chris Lemons, professor in the Graduate School of Education. These are my colleagues, Lakshmi and Utkarsh, and they can introduce themselves when we get rolling. Okay, so I'm just going to start us off with a little chuckle. So this is kind of how I'm currently feeling about AI right now is it taking over the world? Can it actually do everything? Can it write some really fabulous Broadway musicals? Perhaps. I think some of you in the room, what I'd really love to do is pass out buttons in the beginning when you come in. I love AI. I hate AI. I unfortunately speak often before I think, and we had an AI symposium for the Learner Differences initiative, and I actually opened the symposium by saying, "Hi, I'm Chris. I hate AI." And what I meant by that is I just think it is such a complicated, confusing space, especially in the world of education where we are. And so hopefully we'll shed a little bit of light on our thoughts on that. So I'm very glad you're here. I think all of us, we've been in schools working with kids, so we're very comfortable. If you have a question as we're rolling along, raise your hand and shout out. We're fine being interrupted, but we will save some room at the end for Q&A. And I'm going to turn it over to Lakshmi, who's going to get started with some background, and I'll get the timer started for you.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name is Lakshmi, and I'm excited to be here. Okay, so what is CHI? So, a quick background about myself. I'm special ed teacher for 14 years. Did my PhD at Berkeley and in special education with a focus on inclusive education. I believe students with disabilities should be educated alongside their typical peers, and that it's our responsibility to figure out how to structure that context so that they have meaningful participation. I have low vision myself. I'm partially blind, use a cane to navigate. And I will share what our philosophy around disability and inclusion as well is as I go along. So what is CHI other than being a cute octopus? It is an AI co-pilot, agent, assistant. I think the terms keep changing. Really is designed to enhance literacy skills in students with learning differences. Focused on students with learning differences, it's comprehensive support for both learners and teachers. So teachers have dashboards so that they can kind of take a look and track progress, see how their kids are doing. The AI is grounded in pedagogical skills and evidence-based research. Background information, super grateful to HAI for funding this project. They gave us a seed grant to really look at how can we use AI to kind of harness the power of AI to improve student outcomes in literacy, specifically reading comprehension and writing. And it was developed right here. Okay, so the background research. So writing proficiency, a lot of students with learning differences, specifically those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, have a gap when it comes to writing. Now, why is this important? In classrooms, in high schools and middle schools, if students with intellectual and developmental disabilities and other learning differences tend to get placed in segregated settings if they're not able to keep up, even though the law says that we should be providing the supports and services to educate them alongside their typically developing peers in the least restrictive environment, that is usually not the case, right? Students are placed in segregated settings because they're not able to keep up. So this is something that has always, been something that I've been interested in, and I believe that they need to get that opportunity. And hence, writing is very important because that is one of the reasons, that's one of the ways in which we assess students, right? Write this, write that, answer this. There's a reduced employment outcome when students are not able to have proficiency in writing, potential impact on quality of life. This is data from national longitudinal studies. And there's a rising societal expectation for how productive people are, how they do, their employment, et cetera. And so we were really interested in working in that space. Chris's research has been focused on literacy outcomes for students with disabilities. I've been really focused on inclusive education. And so, it's really critical to involve students in the design. And that is something that we did as we were designing this tool. We had students with disabilities co-design with us, give us feedback. We worked with lots of high school students as well in the design process. So there is a lot of research on how kids with learning differences learn. There is decades of work actually that shows that these strategies are really effective. One is explicit systematic instruction, the use of clear language and having a focus, use of modeling and corrective feedback, as well as use of an I do, we do, you do model, which is a gradual release of responsibility. I do being the modeling done by the teacher, we do being guided practice with the teacher's support before releasing the student to do that independently on their own, as well as just-in-time scaffolding. So we know that this works, right? And so and then the other thing we also know is that there are explicit teaching strategies that help students understand text. So think of it as training wheels. So it's not that you need to have a strategy on hand all the time, but if you do have a strategy and you learn using a strategy, then comprehension becomes a lot easier. So strategies really are like training wheels. They provide a structure for approaching a task, and eventually, like a training wheel, you can take them off. So the philosophy embedded in CHI is that variability is the norm. There is no average learner, right? And we really have to think about how contexts sometimes are inflexible. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we are very rigid in the way we assess students or in the way we present information or the way we engage students. But if we use the principles of universal design for learning and provide multiple ways in which we engage students, multiple ways in which we present that information, and have multiple ways in which students can demonstrate understanding, we then are understanding that variability is the norm. So in CHI's design, we really design to the edges, knowing that there is no average learner. The research, it really integrates, research-backed pedagogy. We've actually included, we'll show you how it works, but we've embedded explicit instruction into the tool. And it's informed by a deep understanding of classroom practice. Both of us, Chris and I, were classroom teachers, so we've worked with students, supported them in general education classrooms, and so understand the rigor that is embedded in those settings. And one of the things, I think the core belief that we have is that we believe that disability really exists at the intersection of the individual and the environment. And so really we have to think about how contexts are disabling. And by that, I mean that we have to think about what tools are we providing, how are we providing scaffolding, and what are ways in which we can mitigate the impairments that they may have by providing those supports. So the need for Chi is, that writing is crucial for success. Comprehension of informational text is really important in middle and high school. This is when they're reading to learn, and that they have to be able to, look at text in science, social studies, in history classes, in all of those settings. So, and there's an increasing demand in the secondary education settings. And because they're not able to keep up, this might potentially limit their future opportunities. So this was why we decided there was a need for something like this for Chi. And a big thing that motivated us is a lot of times there are technology comes up, there are tools, but students with disabilities tend to get left behind, and everybody else will kind of race ahead and use those tools. But what about students with IDD? So we really wanted to ensure that we incorporated things that worked for them in these tools, and so that they can be there alongside their peers. All right, so I'm going to give you a strategy overview right now. So this particular strategy that I'm going to show you that is embedded in Chi is based on a federally funded grant, Project Cali. Chris was a co-PI on that grant. It's called Content Area Literacy Instruction. It was originally designed for students with learning disabilities in middle school. If you're interested, the paper's picture is there. And if you just Google Project Cali, get the gist, it'll come up on Google Scholar as well. And the link is there. So the main thing that this strategy focuses on is how do you understand the main idea when reading text, right? So it's aligned with the Common Core State Standards, and it's useful for both narrative and expository text. The current RCT is focused on expository text, but it can be used for narrative as well. And it can support the understanding of content area like social studies, science, and it helps learners identify the most important information in the text, in the paragraphs. So how does this work? I'm going to click through and put this. Okay, so when a teacher sets, is going to read a text, she'll usually set a purpose for the reading. So similarly, Chi does that. It says, okay, you're about to read this text. And the purpose question that you're going to answer at the end of reading this text is this. So it sets a purpose for reading. Then next, it selects an appropriate text, or the teacher in this case will select the appropriate text, provides background knowledge, like what is the background you need to know in order to access that text. Think of it like instructional Velcro, right? So in Chi, they'll watch a background video that will give them some information about the text. So if the text that they're about to read is about pronghorns being fast land animals, then they will watch a 2 to 3 minute short video on pronghorns. Then we pre-teach the essential vocabulary, things that they're going to come across in the text that they need to have a simple, plain language definition for. So the way Chi does it is it'll show the vocab word, give an image, you click the card, and then it flips over and shows you the definition. So 4 steps: set a purpose for reading, select appropriate text. Number 3 is background knowledge, instructional Velcro, and pre-teach essential vocab. Okay. Next, here's the strategy. It's called Get the Gist. So when the student is presented with the paragraph, so UDL is embedded. Student can click, it'll read, highlight while reading, etc. But then it'll ask the question, who's the most important who or what in this paragraph? So who or what is this paragraph mostly about? The second step is, what is the most important information about that who or what? So who or what, most important information. Now we'll put those two together in about 10 to 15 words to write a gist statement or a main idea statement, right? So 3 clear steps as you're reading the paragraph. This actually offsets the cognitive load for many students with disabilities because it provides a structure through which they can actually scan the paragraph. So who or what, most important, put it together in a. Then Chi embeds explicit instruction. So I do, we do, you do. So it's actually Chi do. So Chi do. Kai will first demonstrate paragraph 1. It'll go ahead and say, I'm going to show you how to identify who or what. I'm looking at the words that are being repeated. Now let me do most important information. I'm looking for examples, cause and effect. So it'll kind of give the student how it's thinking through, just like a teacher would or a paraeducator. And then it will write the gist statement. Then Kai gives hints. So Kai is doing it with the student. So says, look at what word is being repeated. Now, if the student doesn't get the answer, then Kai will provide choices. So I'm going to talk about the hinting structure as well. So we do is guided practice. So modeling, guided practice before Kai sets them off to do it on their own. And the way it's set up is that even in the you do, if they make a certain number of mistakes, Kai will go back and give guided practice. The next is the scaffolding. I think this is actually gold. So scaffolding, when the student starts to attempt, initial attempt, the student will attempt. Now, if they make a mistake or do not get the right answer, Kai will go in and give a hint. Say, hey, you're on the right track, or here's what you're doing. Pay attention to this. Then it'll give, if they still didn't get it, it'll give them 2 choices. And if they still don't get it with the 2 choices, it'll give them the correct answer. So it's a way to engage in productive struggle, but at the same time, not get frustrated. Okay, so let's do one passage together. We're going to do it really fast. You better tell me who or what this is about. So we're going to, Kai's going to circle and show you that it's about octopus. So that's the hint. And then it underlines the most important information. So the passage is about octopus. They're special sea animals, live in oceans. So this is the kind of graphic organizer Kai will come up with and model. And then the same format is used when the student does it independently as well. So here's the info about octopus and the most important information. The students write a gist statement, too long, so they'll shrink it, and then that's the gist statement, right? So this is how the lesson progresses. It starts with setting a purpose for reading, select appropriate text, background knowledge, pre-teach essential vocab. So a short YouTube video, do the flashcards, the students will match. After that, go into the strategy, most important who or what, most important information, and writing the gist, and rinse and repeat until all the paragraphs are done. So if it's a 4-paragraph reading, I do is paragraph 1, we do is paragraph 2, paragraph 3 and 4 are you do. So they get that, and then Kai will present the purpose question and divide it into 2 parts, and then present the gist statements that they have written along with Kai to them. Using those gist statements, students answer the purpose question. Okay, so that is the strategy, and I'm going to hand it over to Utkarsh.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Am I on? You guys can hear me? Awesome, awesome, cool. Well, hi everybody. I'm Utkarsh, background researcher, engineer, been in 2 decades in the industry, built a lot of distributed systems at LinkedIn. I've also built a few startups in the Valley. So the reason I'm saying all of this is when I thought that we want to basically build a strategy with AI using what Lakshmi just explained, and Mehul here, who's probably written half of the code base of Kai. Say hi, Mehul. So we thought, it'll be really easy, right? I mean, just give all of this to a large language model and it'll figure it out. So we tried that and it didn't work, right? So this is where, hopefully in the next, 15, 20 minutes, I can walk through our, experiences of collaborating with folks outside of the engineering AI community and essentially making AI work, what we call as the last mile problem, of AI, where AI is good enough, but not great, right? And it doesn't actually work when you need it to work. So that's been our journey here in the last 2+ years. So I think the first thing that we wanted to do is not come in as LLMs, as LLMs hallucinate, they have biases. Humans have more so, right? Because, guess who the LLM has learned from, right? So we had to unlearn a lot of what we actually thought about how, AI is going to help the different use cases that we were trying to solve. So one of the things that we did from the get-go was that we wanted to make this a community, driven approach. So we had educators, we had students, we had AI researchers and engineers all collaborate together in labs. And here's some of what we did. We we didn't even build the application first. We actually wrote like a console-based program. And I remember harassing Lakshmi and Chris and me, and we were like, you guys have to look at every output of what Kai is doing. You have to look at the hints that it's coming up with. You have to look at the language, the explanations. Let's make sure that it's actually something that we can put in front of our kids, right? Because, as you know, right, I mean, there is a lot of unconstrained responses that in LLM, a ChatGPT, and Anthropic kind of a solution can give you. And how do we make sure that it's safe to put it out there, right? So we did a lot of trials, therefore, before even we actually started building the application by reviewing this with the different focus groups, including educators, students, teachers, researchers, etc. The whole philosophy was to build a pedagogy-first user experience, a pedagogy-first design, right? So for me, coming from a very AI, very technical background, I knew how to learn, but I had no idea how to teach, right? So first I had to learn, what that even means, right? And that's where, I think submitting to, what teachers know best, what educators know best, and how to bring these principles in forth is what we did with. So we made sure that our approach was, inclusive and, universally designed to start with. So Kai wasn't actually built for a particular group. Kai was built for every learner, neuroatypical or neurotypical, doesn't matter. I mean, we built that philosophy in Kai so that it could be used by anyone in the classroom. We wanted to put accessibility and include as centerfold. So all the controls around Kai was built around, low vision, dyslexia, different kind of, needs that people have from a web interface. So we built a lot of that controls in Kai. We wanted to make sure that it's fun. So we also put in a lot of, like gamification in the tool. We gave stars. We had a little cute octopus with a little buddy octopus as a sidekick, and kids loved that, right? So we did a little bit of a focus groups to make sure that kids like what we're putting out there. The other important thing is trust in AI systems. Without trust, there is no learning, right? So we wanted to make sure that everything Kai does is repeatable, it's consistent, and educators know why. When Kai says something, it happens, and they're able to influence his decisions, And that's kind of all led into this design, right? So I guess just to show you guys a little bit of how Kai actually looks. This is kind of the interface of Kai. The students log in using a web app, so it's essentially a web application right now. It could be iPad or Chrome or what have you. They go in and select one of these passages that they can select from. The passages are broken down by Lexile level as well as grade level, right? And once they select passage, Kai will actually guide them through a nice little interface where they can do some kind of what Lakshmi was saying, a vocab building exercise. Once they build their vocabulary, they will go and get tested on how much they understand different words. This vocabulary is generated by Kai. So based on the passage that is uploaded to Kai, it will come up with the top 5 words that kids need to know. And once they build the vocabulary, we go into what we call as the I do mode. This is the I do mode. The I do mode is essentially where Kai is walking the student through, in a fully autonomous mode in a way, like a teacher would in a classroom, where it's giving initial hints. It's actually showing what parts of the text they need to focus on, and then essentially walking them through the who, what, which is the most important subject, the most important salient parts, and the synthesis of all of this into a gist statement, which is essentially, can you put this idea in like about 10 to 13 words, right? So that's exactly what Kai is doing. The whole point of this is now that students have this instructional Velcro, the next part is when Kai will actually work with them to do one together, right? So that's what Lakshmi was saying. I do, we do, you do. So in this case, what will happen is now, this is the we do mode where Kai is already giving student hints, so they can essentially go and use those hints to answer the question. And as you can see here, the student is basically using these underlined hints to basically submit the answer. Once they submit the answer, Kai will come up with a assessment of that answer. So we have real-time feedback to kids. So based on the answer, Kai will either tell them great, good job, or it will come up with a constructive feedback. In this case, it's great. In the next section, what you will see is when a student actually puts something incomplete. So in this case, let's say the student is struggling with adding a gist statement which is incomplete. So they put in a gist statement, and Kai will analyze that gist. In this case, they're saying microloans are not perfect and they are creating depth cycle, which is a good answer, but it's missing one key component. This is where Kai will analyze the answer, look at all the context, Kai has so far, based on the passage, based on their previous answers, the hints that's been given to them previously, and it'll give them a sentence starter. So this is our scaffolding approach where the sentence starter helps the student go ahead and complete the, the approach. And this is where Kai will come in and actually, great, you're doing great with these readings. Here's another example, and I'm going to skip through it a little fast. I have a little bit more content to cover. But here's another example where the student enters something wrong, right? Where this whole passage was about microfinance, but the student enters mobile banking. So this is where the first level of scaffold comes, where Kai is giving them a hint. And Kai will speak it out very nicely. It has a beautiful voice. Sorry, you have to hear my voice. I wish you could hear Kai's voice. That's much better, I promise. But as you can see, right, this is the second time the student answers something wrong. And now Kai will come up with like a multiple choice for them, making it easier. And let's say, for the sake of argument, student still gets the third part wrong. This is where Kai actually gives them the right answer, but not just that, it will also give them an explanation of, why that answer is the right answer right here. Right? Your answer banks is close, but not quite. The main idea of the passage is about microloans and other tools. So it's basically reassuring that, hey, you said something that's in the passage, so good job, but actually the passage is about this. So they're moving the student from the details to the main idea. So I'm going to move on from this demo. There's a lot to it, but just wanted to give you guys a flavor of how, Kai interacts with students and such. But look at some of this. This is how we build Kai. This is like the making of Kai. These are some of the prompts. And these are some of the prompts. And each one of these is like a 4-page long prompt, right? So prompt writing is really an art. It's essentially how do you coax the LLM, like Mel says, right? Coax. How do you coax the LLM to do what you want it to do, right? So we had to do a lot of that with the initial trials that I was showing, working with Lakshmi, working with Chris, working with the students, working with many schools around the area, the teachers, right? To get it right. Because we wanted to start with a fast approach where, we could prompt the LLM to do something. Yeah. What we did observe is that while we wrote these several prompts, there appeared a typology of these prompts, a pedagogical typology. And that was divided into these 5 or 6 categories. The first category was comprehension. So the who, what, the most important, the gist, these set of prompts help kids comprehend. The second set was, the systematic synthesis and purpose creation. So there's a section in Kai where actually once they finish all these who, what, most important, gist, they have to answer a main purpose question that summarizes the entire passage. Right? We also came up with prompt that helped identify vocabulary words that essentially help them build their background context. And then, teacher modeling was really important. The I do mode that you see, that's teacher modeling. That's where, the teacher actually walks the student through various stages of, attempting this exercise. So these are some of the observations around the prompt. We saw that, if you just distill these prompts into 4 or 5 categories, right? These prompts, help kids, mirror best practices like explicit instruction and task analysis. They help, the affirmation-based design helped reduce anxiety because we saw a lot of kids being anxious when it was wrong. I remember there was one iteration of Kai earlier on where we were just saying yes or no, right or wrong. And kids were getting super demotivated. They didn't want to go to the next section because they just got flat out wrong. So in this iteration, then the most recent iteration, what we did was yes, but, right? Or no, but, right? And then gave them like something that sticks back to their understanding. And that really, I think, helped a lot move forward. And then, visual content formatting was also important. So basically highlighting the right parts of the passage for them to get, visual clues on which parts of the passage they look like. So all of this were baked into the earlier set of prompts that you guys saw, right? But what were some of the motivations, right? So now, talking purely from an AI and, I guess, engineering standpoint, right? What were the motivations of selecting the LLM that we selected, right? So we wanted to make sure that there is absolute data privacy, right? This is student data. We wanted to make sure there is absolutely no, leak of data, right? So we did a lot of student coding, meaning our database does not store any personal information. There is no student information. There is no parent information. There is absolutely no information. It's just basically some code like Cobalt, Jaguar, or Spiny, Snack, or something like that. And the entire mapping of that code to the student is with the educator. So Lakshmi or somebody who's more licensed to work with students will have, right? The other thing is Kai is absolutely blind to the student's needs. So it will not know which, I guess, student it's working with, neurotypical or atypical. So we do not emphasize that in our prompts, right? It's, Kai basically works at the student based on how they're actually interacting with Kai based on the language understanding, rather than us pre-imposing anything. And finally, there's a lot of rule-based access control. So in Kai's administration dashboard, based on access levels, people can access one data or the other, right? The other motivation was educator alignment, right? So we wanted to make sure Kai is aligned with teachers, with educators, with people who are working with kids, right? So that was very important for us. And the reliability, meaning does Kai act the same way every time, right? Or is it actually saying different things? Because that's one of the things that we earlier on found. If the student answers something right and Kai does not accept it, there's further demotivation. So all of that was very important. We wanted to prototype fast, right? We wanted to have an iterative development, and we also wanted to make sure that Kai is accessible and it can be reached. So towards the end of my section, I'll talk a little bit about that. But we've been having interest from schools where there are like just phones or WhatsApp or even like low-power laptops, unlike the Chromebooks that we have here. How do you deploy AI to those? Some places even without electricity, right? So there are some things that we have worked on that, and then cost and affordability. We wanted to make this like super affordable across. We've been in talks with some schools in Dubai, some schools in India, and a lot of places. There are different challenges that we wanted to solve for. So one quick experiment we did while we were trying to what we call understand the mind of Kai, right? How does Kai do assessment, right? So we actually did some kind of a model introspection. So every time Kai was giving an answer or accepting or rejecting a student's answer, we were telling Kai, hey, think aloud loud. Think why you're doing what you're doing and put that somewhere, right? So it's, we obviously didn't have access to any of the model vectors or the activations of the vectors. So what we did is we just used chain of thought reasoning to, emulate that. And we told every time you grade something, as part of your reasoning trace, tell me why you did what you did, right? And this is some of the 5-6 things it came up with. It was looking for conciseness. It was looking for, comparison to a reference answer. And mind you, reference answer is what we generate when a teacher uploads a passage. So when a teacher uploads a passage, we generate model answers that could be compared to, and this is basically also generated by AI, obviously. So it was doing a lot of comparison to that model answer, right? Obviously accuracy, purpose identification, and then essentially identification of the main points, right? So here are some of the observations. We ran experiments with 4 models. We started with the baseline GPT model. GPT 4.1 was cheap. It was very reliable. And essentially what we found is that it was very stable, right? We had to do a lot of prompt engineering. Obviously, initially when we just used a vanilla prompt saying, I'm a teacher, you're a student, do this, do that, did not work, right? So those 100-page prompts that you saw was basically coaxing, the GPTs to do exactly the way we wanted it to work, right? After that point, it was very stable. We could see that it was consistently reproducible, and it provided, good experience across various tasks, right? But it's expensive, but it needs the internet, and you cannot deploy it on low power devices, and there's latency, it's slow, right? So then we tried to experiment with some smaller models. So we looked at 3 different models. Quen, the family of models, really good family of models. They're like extremely lightweight models. So just for comparison, if GPT is a 500 billion parameter model, Quen is a 0.6 billion parameter model. So it's almost like 1,000 times smaller, right? So you can run it on your phone. You can run it on your low power laptop, right? And it's free. I mean, it's open source, right? So we did some comparison with that and these other 2 models. And what we found in the middle 2 models is that, 1.7 actually did a lot better, than, just out of the box base model without fine tuning did a lot better. And you can see, when I say coverage here, right? Coverage essentially is that GPT looked at 10 topics and it graded those 10 topics as deemed necessary to grade an answer. How much did the other models look, right? So the middle 2 models were about 50%, matching GPT's coverage, right? And about 60% accuracy, etc. But when we fine-tune, one of the models, and when I say fine-tune is we basically looked at our own student data set, de-identified, anonymized, and we use that data set to train actually a Quen 0.6B model on one of the tasks. We almost saw on 90% coverage in our concepts, right? And a higher accuracy. So there is some promise. Obviously, we're not done with our experiments yet. So we do want to train it for all the tasks, but there is promise, right? Even with a 1.7 billion parameter model, there is promise that we can deploy it on lower power devices. So that's something we will work with. Thanks to Stanford, we have access to a lot of labs here, and we get help from the best minds. So I think we're just going to work with some of the labs here and try to figure out what's the best way to go forward with, especially when we want to deploy to like rural areas, right, with low electricity and such. So I guess that's my section where I think the next set of steps is again fine-tuning the models, trying it on low power devices. We are also looking at multimodality. So there's some recent development in smaller multimodal models. There is language models. We're looking at languages like in Dubai there's Arabic, we have Hindi and Odia in India. I don't know if RJ is in the room, but we're working with him and the education ministry in India to bring multiple languages and multilingual, multimodal experiences. So a lot is to be done. But I think in conclusion, right, and I think my time is up. I think this was again going back to my experiences, right. I thought I knew things about AI and how to build AI for good, right. But I think when you really actually work in a cross-discipline environment, and that's what in this whole exercise I realized that AI is only as good as its efficacy, right? And its efficacy can only be measured by the experts, right? So engineers and experts need to work together, domain experts, to bring what really makes most impact for all. So that's my section. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I hope you've heard two main things so far in this talk. One, for how many of you are AI developers in that realm somewhere? Okay. How many of you are just doing research on AI? How many of you are educators who might use AI? Okay, so what I really hope that you heard from the beginning part of this talk is, one, it is critical to involve people with the lived experience of disability in these projects from the design, from the very beginning, and educators. So we went to EdTech in New York City last year, and I was appalled by the number of tools that were super sharp and shiny that teachers were clamoring all over, but there was not an educator on the team. There was not a person with lived experience of disability on the team. And so I think it's really critical to include those people in the design. The second thing that I think Kai has done really nicely is incorporate evidence-based practices of how kids learn and how teachers should teach. And so we're bringing in the science of learning and teaching into the tool. So it's not just, wow, the AI can do this cool little thing. We're trying to use evidence-based practices of how kids learn and how teachers should teach. And I think those are two critical things you should look for when you're evaluating AI tools. The third one is you need to actually have some data to show that the thing is doing what you want it to do. And so I think, again, when we were in EdTech, I'd be like, oh, this is beautiful. Like, I love your little unicorn that rides the spaceship. It's beautiful. Do kids actually learn anything? And they're like, I don't know. They seem to like it. It's like cartoons. And so what we decided to do with the HAI grant, again, thanks for that funding, which has been really critical for this project, is to run a randomized control trial. And this is going to be, I'm going to just briefly show you some data on this trial, and then I'm going to have Lakshmi come back up, and she's going to talk about some deeper kind of discourse analysis that we've done. So basically what we were trying to do in this project, we wanted to develop the tool. And as you can see, that took a lot more work, I think, than we anticipated. And me as the educator who gets very confused by the last slide that Kirsch just presented, there were a lot of meetings where I just was like, oh my God, why are we doing this? So what we really wanted to do is see, does this tool work with kids with learning differences? Does it work as intended? So can they use it? Can they actually just use it? Do they like using it? And is there any evidence that it improves their ability to comprehend those grade level, or actually fourth grade level expository text passages? And so the data I'm about to show you, one important thing is all of this has been coded by someone who didn't know the condition. 25% of it was coded by two people, and our reliability was incredibly high, 95%. So our randomized control trial looks like this. So basically, we had every student in our study, first of all, do a baseline passage. So here we just gave them a paper and pencil task. Here's a fourth grade expository passage. Read it, write main idea statements for each paragraph, answer the purpose question. Next, we trained the students in the get the gist strategy and kind of understanding how to use Kai, what it's going to ask you to do. So make sure they had a clue what they were doing. And then passages and children were randomly assigned to one of three conditions. So one, independent. That's just me. And these were all done in random order with random passages for the kids. So One, you would do the passage independent. So same as baseline, you read a different fourth grade level passage and you write main idea statements and you answer the purpose question. Second, we're trying to replicate what often happens for kids with intellectual disability in schools is that an adult is sitting beside them, often a paraeducator who's like a special ed support person, to kind of prompt and say, oh, look here, highlight that word, remember this. So the kind of typical support you would get in school. And then third is using Kai. So walking through what Lakshmi just showed you. I'm going to show you the data on baseline versus those three conditions in a second. And for Kai, I want to show that we're including the data. The first response, whenever it says, who's the most important, who or what, the first thing they type in, or their gist statement, their first time of typing that in. And then Kai plus hints is whenever they have their response after Kai has helped them along. So obviously that one's going to be a little better because they're getting help along the way. And then last, we are collecting longitudinal Kai data, and I'll talk about this in a second. We don't really expect that we would just teach you the strategy one time and woohoo, I can comprehend everything now, I'm doing great gist statements. This is something that they're going to need a lot of practice with. So we're collecting data where students are using this over a longer period of time. So how we coded this is we developed a set of rubrics. For the gist statements, it goes on a scale of 0 to 8, where we're looking at, is the length appropriate? Did they get the correct subject? Do they get the correct information about that who or what? And are they able to identify it in a concise, or to create their gist statement in a concise way? So those are things that we're coding. And again, these were coded with the coder being unaware of what condition the responses were from. For the answer to the purpose question, we have a separate rubric that makes sure that they're covering all of the components of the question, that they're integrating evidence from the text, that they have some logical organization, which is sometimes a challenge, and that their information is accurate. So these are things we're looking for. And when we get to the discussion, we can talk about, there are some parts of this that we would change. I think especially the length one was a little bit clunky, but it was a good pass to get us into what we're looking at. So what you can see here, I'm reporting the average score on the gist statement for paragraphs 3 and 4. We're not doing paragraph 1 because Kai does that for them in the I do model. We're not doing paragraph 2 because that's we do, where Kai is really supporting it. So we're only looking at 3 and 4, which is the student's original response. And what you can see here is that at baseline, students are getting a score of about 3.4. With Kai, 4.08. Kai plus hints, it goes up a lot to 6.3. And with the adult, 3.58. So with these comparisons of the paragraph 3 and paragraph 4 gist statements, Kai is a little bit better than than baseline and adult. That's at a like 0.10, so not statistically significant. We do have quite a bit of variability in student performance using the rubric, but there's a little bit of evidence that students are doing a little bit better on their initial gist statement for paragraphs 3 and 4 using Kai. Once they get some hints and a little guidance, that score just goes drastically up. And so that's what good teaching looks like, is I'm going to point you to the right direction and kids are more likely to get the correct answer. What is more meaningful is that when we look at the answer to the purpose question on the far right, we can see that both the Kai and the Kai plus hints condition are statistically significantly better than all 3 other conditions. So what this is indicating is that students are much more likely to be able to answer a purpose question after using reading a text. It's likely to be more accurate, include more of the components that we want them to include just on their first attempt, and then it's even better after they get some support. So this is really positive data, that we're showing that even just learning how to use Kai and doing it once, your answer to those questions are much better. And so we hope that as we get that longitudinal data, we'll have more evidence that hopefully their paragraph 3 and paragraph 4 statements are also improving over time. Okay, questions about this before I move on? Yes.
Was it surprising to you how much better Kai plus hints was than an adult? Was the adult a trained educator, or, that just seems like a really big difference?
Yeah, so I think So this is going to be a caveat of the end. If we were to do this study once again, we really would like to have the adult apply the same Chi strategy. So they were not really given guidance on how to help. One thing that I think is interesting is that the adult score is actually lower than, like over here for the answer to the purpose question, you can see that the adult score is actually a little lower than independent. And what we've come to find out both in, I mean, it's really hard as a teacher to think on the fly, especially when we have many of our paraeducators and people who are providing support. Sometimes they provide incorrect support. And so that's one thing that we would like in the future to have a condition. Another condition we should have had is the paraeducator using Chi with the student. So kind of a triad instead of on their own. Because I think sometimes the adult in the room just can't think quickly enough to actually provide the correct answer, and Chi can. And so I think that's something we need to explore a little more. Okay. And so this is just a quick example of some of those initial, so you can kind of get a qualitative feel for what the answers look like. So Purple Tiger over here, you can see that their score went up to 13 from 4 with pencil and paper. And things that they're saying are like, whenever they were just given the pencil and paper, their answer to the purpose question was, alligators are nice to birds and help the birds. And it's like, well, that's not really quite where we're going. But with Chi, they were able to say the latter helps the fish swim upstream as they face obstacles, and ultimately it helps the fish reach the Damascus Lake. So this is about those fish ladders that, fish need to go from one place to another and they can't get up there, so they have all these little ladders for them to climb. And so obviously number 3 is a much deeper reflection of understanding that passage. We have Blue Dolphin over here who went from 4 to 9. Initial response was herring fish and Maine eggs. Okay, don't know what that's about. The corona is so hot because it's so hot and magnetic forces are there. So that's a different passage, but more detail in it. But I think really providing, like what Lakshmi said about kids' cognitive load, when I just give you a passage and say, like, read that and answer the purpose question, it's like, I don't even know where to start. And so here we break it down. Look at paragraph 1, the most important who, and the most important who or what. And so it really provides them a nice structure to get through the passages. So anecdotally, we saw that we really did have increased engagement with Chi. This is especially for our older students. Y'all might know some of these students. So you put a worksheet in front of them. I remember one of our favorite kiddos scribbled on it, ripped it, and threw it on the floor. It's like, well, that's a score of 0. And that young adult, I thought, this is way too hard. That's why he's not doing it. Nope, put him on Chi. He aced it. So he was just conditioned that pencil paper sucks and I don't want to do it, but I'm willing to engage with the computer. So I think there are a lot of cool things that we can do with this tool. I'm going to turn it over to Lakshmi to go through some of our qualitative, and then I'll come back for reflections, and then we'll have Q&A.
So what I'm going to do actually is kind of looking at the why. Why did this happen? Why did we get good results? I'm happy, but we were curious as to why did this work, right? So we did some deeper analysis on a couple of the students, and what we have decided is probably that we're going to actually analyze all of our students' interactions with the AI. So what we did is measuring deeper comprehension, and we looked at how are they reasoning, how are they integrating, right? So those were some of the things that we started to look at. So the goal was move beyond, really factual recall to look at integrative reasoning and the ability to synthesize information from distal paragraphs. So are they able to synthesize info from paragraph 1 to paragraph 4, things like that. So that's what we started looking at. So the framework we used was the integrated reasoning framework by Alexander Blum. Alexander is a postdoc over here and a very close colleague. We also looked at some of the other work by Nicholas and Trabasso from 1979 as well. And this was specifically for informational text. So some of the key metrics that we looked at is integration, being able to combine information from paragraphs far apart. Coherence is how logically is this organized, as well as what is the text space focus? Are they drifting from the text, or are they able to kind of stay on the text? So we did 2 case studies, and so we didn't have, this was something that we started doing recently. So I'm only presenting 2 and only 2 conditions. So I analyzed baseline and with the Chi model. So analyze a student with Down syndrome, as well as a student on the spectrum. So these were the two case studies. So let's go into the case study of the student with Down syndrome first. So baseline paper pencil analysis. So there was low integration in the answer. The text focus was partially text-based, and it included some inaccurate inclusions. Like they talked about, wolves and coyotes that was not part of the text. And then there was also some unsupported opinions. Birds are not very nice. Well, I was like, maybe the bird shot them, who knows? So low integration. So it was some sort of associative chaining of facts, like using and multiple times, because we looked at the conjunction use, right? And the coherence was kind of weak. So for example, he said helps birds and eat predators. Birds are not very nice, but they like alligators, right? So the logic is associative and it's kind of jumbled. So now let's look at the same student, the with-Chi analysis. Had high integration, right? The text focus was 100% text-based, and we think that Chi disciplined the focus to be on the text, right? And the integration was really high because the student was able to integrate information from paragraph 1 with paragraph 4, and successfully, right? So the coherence was really strong. So the example was this was about pronghorns. The pronghorns are faster, but are bad at jumping, right? So that I'll show you where that info came from. And people are trying to fix fences. So used very precise conjunctions to build a logical argument. So we think that Chi's impact was it facilitated the move from associative logic and inaccurate recall to a structured text-based synthesis. And so let's look at this over here. So so let's kind of deconstruct what happened, right? So the distal synthesis was that he was able to stitch facts across the text. So they are faster, came from paragraph 1, and bad at jumping, fixed fences came from paragraph 4, and the precise use of conjunctions. He used an adversative conjunction. I had to learn how to say that. Correctly links the contrasting text-based traits, that's fast versus can't jump, right? Use it causally, and linking the identified problem to the text-based solution. And the event chain, this was really key, right? Demonstrates a very sophisticated logical event chain, identifying a problem and linking it causally to the solution. So moving far beyond simple informational recall. The answer was they are faster, but are bad at jumping, and people are trying to fix fences to help the pronghorns get through. And the thing that was surprising for us was when Chi did the split, like Chi takes the purpose question, splits it into 2, presents question 1, question 2, and then asks the student to actually rewrite the answer if they want to, right? He actually rewrote the answer and wrote this all by himself. And there were also pieces that he had recalled directly from the text. And this is a student that we've worked with and who does struggle with working memory. So we think that because Chi took the pressure and the cognitive load of what he needed to do structurally to go through the passage, he was actually able to recall information and integrate it into the answer. So another quick analysis, autism spectrum. I'm just going to check on the time. Oh, okay. There's time. So the cognitive profile for this student was strengths in detail processing, but kind of a weak central coherence, and was really good at localized reasoning, right? But had challenges with organizing information across the text. So the baseline paper pencil analysis, it was strong text implicit reasoning, right? So that means the student was able to take good localized synthesis, so take fact A plus fact B and do, kind of talk about the relationship. So for example, the coherence was strong. Eat small animals, in return, the alligators get food, so it was able to kind of build that argument pretty well. So now let's look at the with-Chi analysis. Same student. Actually, we saw really good high integration over here. And what the student did was integrate facts from each paragraph. So use just 1, 2, 3, and 4, and kind of integrated to what's the purpose of whatever he was writing about, wrote the method and the outcome very clearly, right? And it was a very sophisticated text-based answer. So these are the words, some of the words the student used. So, this was really a discourse analysis that we did. That's why it took so long, but using a cognitive lens. So the purpose is to help, and by providing small pools, making it easier. So see the words that they've used to integrate and reason. The impact, we think, was that Kai provided the organizational framework, that is the gist, the main idea statements that the student had to create, right? But it gave that structure to do that, and that elevated the students' existing skills from localized reasoning to a much more coherent synthesis. So how Kai fosters integrative reasoning, this is, very initial, but we think that, because Kai is giving the building blocks for using the getting the gist strategy, it breaks the text down, the adaptive hints that Kai provides, as well as the supports, really helps the student focus on understanding the text. And so by the time they're done, and we saw this actually, we went into a third grade classroom, we read this passage about the corona, did the strategy, and there were many multilingual learners in that classroom. And just as a thing, I asked everyone at the end, what was the passage mainly about? And they were able to say it, right? So I think that is a really good support, that strategy is built in as well. But it really went from informational to logical chains. So the structured APQ process really prompts the student to break the question down, bring the answer together, and then cohesively write it. And I think that for the cognitive profile, especially that we see in Down syndrome, specific learning disability especially, it reduces the cognitive load because of those structured scaffolds and allows the focus on reasoning and enforcing that text-based discipline, right? Really focus on what is the text saying. Not that we don't want them to integrate global knowledge, right? But when they're asking questions about a text, we want them to be able to stay with that text as well. For students with autism, I think it provided an organizational structure to leverage their existing strengths for complex synthesis, but it really helped those dialogic moves that Kai uses. So a lot of students on the spectrum tend to struggle with Gestalt processing, which is kind of getting the main idea. We saw this in a lot of our data as well. They would kind of focus on the details and kind of spit that out. But Kai used certain dialogic moves to say, oh, you're like a treasure hunter, but now let's look for the big treasure. I want you to zoom out. So those sort of, that sort of language kind of helped them move towards that main idea. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Chris.
This is a question for Utkarsh. Just regarding the Kai and the LLM that you're using, or the AI that you're using, did you have a lot of challenge ensuring consistency in how it was doing the thing you wanted it to do?
Am I on? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for the first several iterations, we were not able to get Kai to respond consistently. I think the biggest challenge was for a semantically similar answer, Kai was not accepting it, consistently. So the student would answer in a different way, or may put some more detail, less detail, and Kai was just saying, no, you're wrong, and here's the right answer, which was actually very semantically similar to that. So that was one of our biggest challenges, which is where, we had to write these, thousands of prompts, right? A long prompt, 1,000-line long prompts to get it there. I think the goal with the distillation and the smaller models is to bake that information on what we prompt engineered into the model's learning itself, the model activation itself, so that, we don't have to prompt it. So yes, absolutely. We struggled a lot with that initially.
So is the Kai web interface as of now, up and running and accessible to everybody? And if not, what are the steps to get in there?
Oh, it's absolutely accessible. I think the slide deck, are we going to share the slide deck? Or the recording, yeah. So it's basically available on cluo.ai. There's an information form there. If you just submit that, Samantha here, will personally reach out to whoever submits it, and we'll get you an account available. So cluo.ai, it's available.
Awesome. And part B of that question, could you feed your own articles into
Yes,
Kai?
Yes. There is a passage upload feature, and Samantha has an amazing video on how to do that too.
How do we access that video?
Yeah, I'm a newer researcher with the team, and I created a video just to explain how to upload your own passage. It's a little bit more complicated than just uploading your own PDF, but you basically get to copy and paste any passages that you would like in, and then the AI in a purpose question as well, and then the AI splits that purpose question into two parts so that the student is able to get to the final purpose question with a few more steps. The AI also identifies 5 vocab words for the passage, and then and that's basically it. You upload some photos for the vocab. It's pretty easy. Yeah, uploading passages.
I'm curious, why did you decide to take paper and pencil for baseline instead of computer input? So to kind of roll out these effects that can be connected to like handwriting.
Yeah, so the question basically, why did we choose pencil paper for baseline versus computer or something else? I think for us, we were just kind of starting to think, could this tool have any value added compared to traditional practice? So paper pencil is really where kids start. I do think you're exactly right of, there are several comparisons that are not included in this initial study that we need to add. So it would be really interesting to see just transitioning the paper pencil task to a computer. Perhaps it's just being on the computer that has some value added. So we need to test that. It's the same thing of, thinking about the adult providing support. We did not give that adult a structure to provide the support. So we could also test if we have the adult acting like Kai, so providing the same type of hints and structure, perhaps that's sufficient as well. I think an additional kind of comment on that question, one of the things I think we also could evaluate is even if we train the adult to do the strategy, and let's just say outcomes are similar, whether the kid is using Kai or the adult, Kai is more efficient and more, a special ed teacher could place 5 kids on Kai and be monitoring them, so therefore address 5 kids at a time, whereas an adult sitting next to the kid can only really do 1, maybe 2 kids at a time. So I think when we're looking at future evaluations of this, there are questions other than just which one has the strongest performance, like efficiency and those things matter as well. But very, very smart question because, who knows what's the magic difference between Kai and not whenever we compared it to such a very different condition.
Hi, 2 questions. First of all, how did you come up with name Kai?
That's not me.
We had lots of high school students vote on. We had a group of students who were really helping us co-design, and we asked them. And Kai is apparently the Welsh name for keeper of the keys or something. So we were like, okay, unlocking literacy potential. And Kai also means the ocean in Hawaiian. And so since we wanted an octopus, we said, okay, we'll go with ocean.
I can't resist. I have to add Mayul's version, knowledge with AI.
Right.
Sorry, I saw KAI. I thought someone linked to AI. I couldn't figure out what.
No.
Question number 2, how do you envision incorporate Kai into a Gen Ed situation with the student, the only student, with need for such tools where everybody else is able to access?
Great question.
That's a great question. I think that we have to always think about access to Gen Ed for students with disabilities and for those without. Now, let's say you have 3 to 4 students with disabilities included in a Gen Ed classroom, and we want them to access grade level text, but they might need this support in order to do that. This might be something that they could do in their resource classroom so that they can then access the Gen Ed text when they're in their whole group session. We have had Gen Ed teachers want to use this with everybody because we have classrooms that are highly diverse with lots of multilingual learners. So this is a good way to kind of incorporate there as well. In Gen Ed, when we think about differentiated instruction, sometimes students may need something slightly different in order to get access to what is going on. And so Kai could be one of those.
And what I would add to that, where I really hope we take Kai is that it's a tool that, say you're a 7th grade student and the teacher says, you need to read this passage about erosion, and that the student can say, okay, I'm going to read that. I think I'm going to use Kai, that they can drop it in Kai. It says, okay, I know your reading level is more like 2nd grade, so take that passage down to a passage you can read with 95% accuracy. But then what I would really love is that the tool has an array of strategies. So they can do, I want to do get the gist, understand it. I want to do prediction, relay, partner reading, other strategies, other evidence-based strategies. And so that it could be a tool that kids use independently. Like, I want to use this, break it down to my reading level, and I want to apply that strategy. And I think that becomes much more like the training wheels idea, that for those of you in the room that are good reading comprehenders, you don't need a strategy. You can just read the text and get it. For a lot of our learners who need more support, this structure helps them understand how to approach text. And so eventually over time, they might not need it. Although I think some of our learners love the support of the task because it kind of provides some rails around them. And if you can especially think of a kid who might be a little distractible, you know, the ones who are talking about wolves and coyotes or whatever, and it's like, that wasn't even in the passage at all. I think the tool just allows them to kind of keep their concentration on the passage. And so whenever they provide an answer that's one step out, it's like, oh, that's not quite right, come back. And I think a lot of learners actually like that kind of tool because it keeps them focused. So that's where I would envision it going.
Thank you.
Hi, this is a really cool project. I have a question about I think you mentioned that the Kai does not know any information about students' like personal needs. I think because of the kind of the safety issue. But the teachers can, right? Like the para can. And then and it's a little bit hard for me to imagine that like Kai works better than teacher, the para, because like para knows more information about this specific kid. Maybe they have worked with this kid for a long time. I wonder what a kind of like a collaboration model that you can imagine that teacher and Kai collaboratively help the kids, because teachers know more information about the kids, but Kai can be more consistent in many ways.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a couple of things. I do think we're even exploring, and I know there's been a hackathon in this room a couple of months ago. There's other hackathons that I've been at. A lot of people are kind of thinking, how can we use AI to do very much what you're talking about? So like, I know Locke, I know this is his profile. He's good at these things. These are things he struggles with. I drop in my lesson plan. It can be like, okay, Locke's actually sitting in the room. You're going to need to do these 4 things for him. So I think that tool, I think AI can do those things. We've talked about different ways we might incorporate it in AI or in Kai, and I think we might go there in the future. But I will say the one thing about thinking about the adult who knows the student better, so one of the probably most embarrassing things about this whole project, so like Lakshmi said, Callie was developed with Jade and Devin, who are professors at other universities. We spent multiple years coming up with the original training examples for Callie. We dropped it into Kai, and several of the main idea statements that like 3 PhDs and a bunch of doc students came up, Kai's like, that's not quite right. Let me give you some hints, and I'm like, are you serious? Like, I can't even get a main idea statement correct from a 4th grade passage. And so I think that teachers, yes, know a lot about their students, but I think, in our teacher training program, one of the things we have teachers really focus on is in your lesson plan, you need to have all of your examples written down before you get going, because it's really challenging for an educator to keep everything in their head and provide good, responses, like providing good main idea statements off of on the fly. I mean, one of the things, if we had a lot of time, we would ask you to do is actually, one of the things I'd love to do is throw up like a medical textbook paragraph and say, give me the main idea. And all of you are going to be like, oh my gosh, this is actually really hard. And so I think that we need to look at ways to bring in the tool to support the teacher, the para, and the student working together. But I do think the AI tool can often provide higher quality, more accurate answers.
I'll just add one thing. The Kai is fully equipped to do that. I mean, architecturally, we support both a student and teacher profile already. And we just did not influence it because we wanted to have teachers in the loop to evaluate the responses and then build it along the way. And that's why we didn't, pre-impose it. But it fully supports that feature.
Thank you. We'll take one last question.
Thank you very much for such a great presentation and really working on such an important project. 2 questions very quickly. One is that about the kids with dyslexia, which have a completely different relationship with association with text. Have you tried the program and a strategy with kids with dyslexia, which might not even be part of this category, particularly like the intellectual disability of in terms of like reading. The other question that I have is about speed of comprehension. Does that somehow do you incorporate a variable that eventually also help a student speed up like the speed of their comprehension, basically eventually like the growth of the progress that they have, basically?
Yeah, so I'll answer the first question if you want to go and take it. So have we specifically focused on or evaluated the tool with students with dyslexia or specific learning disability? In this project, not explicitly, although I do believe some of the students qualify.
Yes.
Especially middle and high school students, the label gets really sloppy. But in the original randomized control trial that we developed, Project Cali, that was specifically focused on students who were identified in middle school as having a specific learning disability. So many of those were kids with dyslexia. The strategies are evidence-based strategies for those students in terms of reading comprehension. So not teaching basic, like how to read, but comprehension. And in those studies, yes, the strategies were beneficial for that population of learners as well. And I don't know, do you want to address the speed issue?
I'm not sure I understood the speed issue, but I will say that if it is like, does the student need to go through the I do, we do, you do every time? And if they're already learning it and they know how to comprehend and they go into like a you do mode, I think that we can do, right?
Yeah, there's controls to selectively deliver content.
But I do think one challenge we have, I mean, when we first rolled this out, I mean, some of the passage, it was like the kid was like hitting an hour, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to be reading about pronghorns for an hour. Yeah. And so for some of them, we break it into, you do the first 2 paragraphs today, next 2 tomorrow. But one of the most important things you can do to improve fluency or speed with this type of activity is get them a passage that's on their reading level. And so I think that actually takes a lot of the challenge away, because if you are a 6th grader and I give you a 6th grade passage, but you read on a 2nd grade level, it's kind of a pointless thing to do anyway. But even if, let's say, you read more on a 4th grade level, you can probably muddle through the 6th grade. You're not going to understand tons, but you're super slow and challenging. And I think it's one of the easiest things teachers can do to get kids to access text is give them a passage they can read with 95% accuracy. So that addresses part of it. Kind of related to your question as well, the whole like gaming the system thing is something I think all AI people need to work out. We definitely had a couple of kids who are like, okay, so if I just get it wrong, it's going to give me the right answer. And there are a couple of kids who are like, sweet, this is the easiest thing I ever do. Click, 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 click. Yeah. And so, we do know that adults need to be engaged, and we need, I think probably even backing up a whole nother step. That's one of the reasons the purpose question and that background video are so important, because you're going to read about pronghorns. Why the hell do I want to read about pronghorns? Like, how is this relevant to me? And so I think making sure that kids understand, like, how is this relevant to your life? Is it something interesting? Choosing texts that are interesting to them. But even if it's not, making it something like, how could learning about pronghorns, not leaping over fences, like impact you? And I think that's what we often try to do with the background videos. Like one of our passages about erosion, and there's this video with this nice mansion getting like washed out to sea, because the beach is eroding. In that kind of video, kids are like, oh my God, can you imagine if that was your house? Like, and then it's like, sweet, now we can read the passage because you're interested. So I think those apply.
That's all the time we have, but thanks again for everybody for coming, and thanks to Lakshmi, Utkarsh, and Chris for the exciting presentation. Go try Kai, and let's thank the speakers one more time.